people at the faithful stage. And that's kind of my book message is let people move ahead. Is
Let
that
people
one?
move ahead.
Okay.
All right,
Okay.
very interesting. So now here is what we are going to do. We are
Mm-hmm.
going to take a break. Then I'm going to read off something I wrote. There's a lot of pages I wrote for this particular interview. I have about 14 points. And I'm going
Okay.
to quickly run through the points. And then at the
Mm-hmm.
end of those points, I'm going to ask you, hey, the same question I asked just a few minutes ago, is this all necessary? Okay? All right,
Okay.
ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to Dallas Live. Margaret, before you go on the break, can you tell our audience where they can find your book, Faith Beyond Belief?
Sure. It's available really wherever books are sold. Definitely the online sources, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all of those. And then in any bookstore can order it for you. Again, the title is Faith Beyond Belief: Stories of Good People Who Left Their Church Behind. So, and it's also, you can look on my website, faithbeyondbelief-book.com. It has a lot of further information.
All right, so ladies and gentlemen, I bought this book as a Kindle version from Amazon. I read it cover to cover. Of course, I had to do some speed reading, so I may have missed something, but I have to go back after the show and read it again. You are listening to Dallas Live, and we will be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Dallas Live. I am your host, Dr. R.C. You are listening to Margaret Placentra Johnston. She has written the best-selling book and author of Faith Beyond Belief. It is a 2013 gold winner of the Nautilus Book Award, and the book is available at Amazon.com and also as a Kindle version. Margaret, welcome back to our second segment.
Thank you, Ravi.
All right, very good. Now, you see, I told you that I'm going to talk for about a couple of minutes. Now, not to take anything away from you, but I want to ask you this. For
Okay.
example, the Earth was created. I'm a scientist, so I need to talk scientific terms. So,
Okay.
all right, the Earth was created 9 billion years ago. We are all going to die, including all the plants and animals and everything. We are all going to die, and we are not coming back. Now, even if we're coming back, then we are not going to remember it because we don't remember what was our previous incarnation.
Mm-hmm.
Aliens are not going to land here. That's not going to happen. If somebody tells you, then we'll have to scientifically, they have to prove it. There is no higher power. Maybe there is the moral power comes from us, from human beings. There's no other power coming from anywhere else. we have to monitor our actions for the survival of our own species. For example, human race will eventually disappear in about 1 to 3 million years. We are gone. We are not going to be here. Okay. Now, Earth will become like Mars in 2 billion years. There will be no water, no nothing, no atmosphere, nothing. Okay, in 9 billion years, Earth is going to be sucked into the sun. And the sun itself will implode and disappear into a black hole in about 10 billion years. The all spirits, God, soul, all this becomes meaningless at that point. Now, if we want to extend our life, not our life, our human species life of the human species, to at least 3 million years, we have to be nice to each other. Okay. And why do we, the fact of the matter is the fact that we have to be nice to each other is one only thing that is left. Now, if we are not nice to each other, we won't last 3 million years. We will last maybe a million years unless we nuke each other out. So why do we need spiritual growth? Because, this is all gone after a few years, in terms of time.
Well, that's true. Why do you need spiritual growth? So I'm talking more immediately in like this lifetime for all of us. We lead a richer life if we can expand our understanding of our existence. So if you think that it's all about people in your church or your neighborhood or your political party, your viewpoint is extremely limited and your life will be similarly limited. So people who can expand their concern, expand their worldview to include, say, science and animals and plants and things like that, that's a little broader, and they will have a somewhat richer life. But if you can start including everyone and everything and, into your understanding, then I believe that's that post-critical level. And I do believe it's a richer, more nuanced way of living. Things are not as black and white, and you accept more, appreciate the mystery in life. Whether you want to call it a higher power, you don't have to call it that. But I believe that in the extreme cases of these post-critical people, they develop an idea that their purpose here is to serve and to help others. And sometimes they will put themselves way into danger, even in the extreme cases, for the sake of the whole, the sake of trying to save people or, anyone from oppression. So extreme examples, of course, are, Gandhi and Martin Luther King and people who really use their whole lives to doing something for everyone or everything. So that's certainly a broader worldview than saying, well, it's all about me and my people in my church are right, and everyone else should be locked up or whatever. So it's just a broader, more whole, and more healthy, I believe, way of living. And so it doesn't have to include a literal God. In fact, I believe most people at that post-critical level wouldn't. I mean, some use the word God, but they use it very, very loosely, mostly. I think they think of it as connection among people or whatever.
I totally agree, because what you are saying is we have to be, basically you are agreeing with what I said, except that I was wondering, we have to be nice to each other. You don't need to have a higher power to do this. So does that mean the moral authority, there is no specific moral authority. Each of the moral authority lies within ourselves.
Comes from within. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, I was very interested, very, very interesting to listen to what you just said. You brought up two of my heroes, Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King. And in a previous session, we had a conversation. These two, they're politicians, but at the same time, they are more of saints than real politicians, because the real politicians are all psychopaths, according to the previous guy that I was talking to.
Okay.
Very interesting, very good. Now, I was looking at the early part of your discussion there. There were the four guys that you talked about, and I wanted to ask you. I think one was the Mormon, Valerie. Abu Ali was the Muslim. Jim and Murray were Christians. I don't know what denomination.
Catholic,
and Kevin was of Indian ancestry, but he was brought as a Roman Catholic.
Right.
So, what kind of problems? You can tell our audience, once they decided to not really get rid of the church or anything, but they decided to start thinking rationally, what kind of objections and problems they faced in their church?
Well, they all faced different problems because different churches, but um, I like to use the example of Kevin. He's the one who was a veterinarian. He was of Indian descent, but had been brought up Catholic. So when he decided he didn't believe anymore, apparently his entire social set was people from the church, and he belonged to the Knights of Columbus. And so when he started professing that he didn't believe anymore, oh, and one of his best friends was a priest. So when he started professing he didn't believe anymore, he had to actually officially resign from the Knights of Columbus. He had to put up with, I guess his wife said it was just a midlife crisis he was going through. I mean, there's all this feedback he got from all these people, and yet somehow valiantly he seems to be still doing just fine fighting them off. Or discussing, and I think he enjoys being different from them. But in the example of that Abu Ali, the ex-Muslim, and I have to admit that this is a person I could not interview directly. His need for privacy was that high. I had to interview him through an editor. So I've not ever met him or don't know his real name.
Okay.
But from what he said, he had to maintain anonymity because for a male apostate in that Muslim religion,
right,
the penalty may be death. So
oh my God, yes,
there's a complete need to maintain anonymity. So I mean that's an extreme, but that's what that's what he said. So I have to believe that's the case.
so now we talked about the religious people who eventually decided to leave their faith or look for some rational thought process and figure out, hey, where do we stand in this spiritual wavelength. Now what about the atheist? What do you think I mean, according to you, none of them are going to go to hell, right? I mean, either a atheist or a non-believer or an apostate or somebody, nobody's, you don't think that anybody's going to go to hell because they don't believe in this or believe in that, right?
I'm pretty sure I don't believe that hell is a place anyway, so I don't think anyone can go there. Will some of us experience hell in our earthly life for various reasons, but I don't think that there's a literal place you go when you die. So no, I don't believe any of them are going to hell.
What about the atheist?
Mm-hmm.
Those who don't believe in God of any sort.
Right. So one of the large pieces of confusion in our society, the way I see it, is that to make a very complex topic very simple, I believe there are two types of atheists. So you have that lawless level, may or may not be atheists, but in their heart they kind of are. They just don't have trust in anything. So other than pursuing their own will. So that's a type of atheist who, frankly, is trouble in our society and should be preached to become to join their church and become a more lead a more ordered life. But you also find these people at that rational stage. Those are rational, whether you want to call them atheists or whether you want to call them agnostic or whatever they are not literal believers of a church. So in a sense, they are atheists as well. However, they're principled. They are self-disciplined. They're motivated by their own conscience, not by the rules of a church. They are all functional and contributing members of society, and they don't create havoc and chaos in our society. They're productive, useful members of society. So when you say an atheist, an awful lot of people think you're talking about that lawless, pre-religious level, and no, there's an awful lot of atheists who are post-religious and therefore in that rational stage. I don't believe any of them are going to hell, but I would rather see a rational post-believer, a person at the rational stage who has left literal belief behind, than I would like to see a literal believer who thinks that it's right to punish or blow up buildings because people don't believe what they believe.
Very good. So in your book, as you are transitioning from rational to the post-critical faith, you are talking about spiritually awake ones are the ones that are clumped together like imaginal cells. The imaginal
Right.
cells are the ones that causes the cocoon to become a butterfly.
Right.
And I believe there are more of them in Europe than in America right now.
Right.
So now
For
I
your
want,
audience, would
uh,
you like to explain, or shall I
yes,
explain
but
the
you know,
imaginal cell concept?
yes, imaginal self. No, but I want my audience to be in suspense for the imaginal cells concept. So we
Okay.
are concluding the second quarter, and we will listen to some music and commercial break. And ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to Dallas Live. I am your host, Dr. RC. The number to call is 469-307-1642. Margaret, stay on the line. We will be right back.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Dallas Live. I am your host, Dr. RC, and you are listening to Margaret Placentra Johnston. She is talking to us about spirituality, and she's the author of the book Faith Beyond Belief. You can find it in Amazon.com, and also a winner of the 2013 gold winner of the Nautilus Book Award. Now, what is a Nautilus Book Award? What is that exactly?
Well, they have, I forget the wording they use, but they award books that are helping to create a better society. I
Oh,
believe
yeah,
their
better.
motto
Yeah,
is
it says.
better books for a better world.
Right, yeah. Okay. All right, let's go back and talk about imaginal cells. Now, what are exactly imaginal cells, and how that relates to spirituality, and why there are more people with a lot of closely related imaginal cells in Europe rather than in America?
Okay. Well, I'll take the first part. Um, let's go back to the caterpillar. When you have a caterpillar, eventually it goes into a cocoon because it's going to be turned into a butterfly. And apparently, once it gets in that cocoon, it starts forming a few butterfly cells, but the old caterpillar cells, apparently they don't recognize the butterfly cells. They're too different from the way they are. So these caterpillar cells start killing off the beautiful butterfly cells that are trying to emerge. But eventually, the butterfly cells start duplicating themselves quicker and quicker, and the caterpillar cells can't kill them off any longer. And then, of course, eventually, you know the story. Eventually, a beautiful butterfly emerges in the place where there was a caterpillar and then a cocoon. So some people in spiritual development have happened onto this analogy, and they say that traditional conventional society is the caterpillar, and as soon as a few people start to emerge who seem to have this transformed consciousness or this post-critical faith or whatever you might want to call it, the caterpillar like conventional people are very threatened, and they try to disparage everything that the transformed people are trying to say. However, it's also thought in these circles that believe in this that people are transforming quicker and quicker in our society, and more people are reaching these more transformed levels of consciousness, and that eventually, as they spread and share their message amongst each other, kind of like we're doing here, eventually the conventional caterpillar-like cells will give in, and eventually the transformed society will emerge. A large part of the society, individuals, a large number of individuals will be that transformed type instead of the old caterpillar type. So that's the theory. Now, you want to ask me why there's more of them in Europe? I don't know why there are more in Europe, but I can give you an answer why they might be increasing in number now. The more I think about this, the more strongly it becomes obvious to me. In the old days, when people lived in a certain concentrated community for their entire lives, everyone they knew believed the same thing, everyone they knew had the same culture, you could have a sort of provincial worldview and think that your culture was the most important one, and everyone else, well, you knew there were other people, but you didn't think there's almost like they weren't really real. But these days we have neighbors that are different religion, different culture. We have people marrying into our families in a different religion from a different culture. And it's really hard to maintain. You have to work really hard in our world to maintain that viewpoint that, only people like me are deserving of the best in life, or only people like me have the right religion. I mean, I don't see, as globalization and internet communications and everything keeps multiplying so fast, you have to work really hard to maintain those provincial worldviews. So one by one, people are falling from that conventional viewpoint of only my religion is right, only my political party is right. It's a bigger world out there, and I think people are not rapidly, maybe slowly, but our consciousness is expanding some because people are realizing it's a bigger world than my little corner of it.
Very good. So the imaginal cells are an interesting concept. So the bottom line is, the religious people are like caterpillars, and post-critical faith are more beautiful.
Butterfly. Although that's not really, I mean, they all have their own problems. No one is 100% one or the other. It's a general trend I'm talking about. We don't go judging one person to say whether they're caterpillar or butterfly. That isn't fair.
No, that's not fair. I'm just, making it a little bit lighter because this is a very heavy subject and it's very hard to understand. And I understand, that means Australia would have a lot more imaginal cells, because there's only 25% in Australia believe in religious route for enlightenment and spirituality. They are not into much of religion at all, and it's the same. It's about probably 50-50 or even less in Europe. Only America is the last bastion of religious rites and religious activities, and I don't know how long this is going to last, because eventually they will have to figure out that the religion by itself is not going to solve the problem. It's not going to give them the salvation that they want, and they have to look for something else. And that's where this book comes in, Faith Beyond Belief. Let me ask you a few other questions on this particular subject. Now, you were raised as a Catholic.
I was.
And what is that? What is that in Catholicism that you found not so appealing to you?
Well, my story is sort of in the book. It's in the introduction, in the middle section. Introduction. It's not it doesn't stand as an independent story, but I didn't have so much of a problem. I went to Catholic grammar school for 8 years, and I went to Catholic high school, and then I went to a Catholic college. Well, in Catholic grammar school, they made us memorize all these facts. It was called the Catechism. It was a book of facts about our belief.
Right.
And any one of us could spout off rote answers to anything, who is God or who is Jesus. We had good answers for that, pounded into our heads. So I got to high school, and lo and behold, I guess they were doing this in those days. This would have been the mid 60s. The priests started telling us, well, all this stuff that you memorized, it wasn't meant to be literal. It was, there's no such place as heaven and hell. They're states of existence. And Jesus is not the Son of God. That's anthropomorphic language that something we make up so that ordinary people can understand it. And I mean, they just went ahead and told us all the things we had learned were not true. So I reacted in two ways. One, I was somewhat indignant that they had made us memorize all this stuff and then tell us it's not true. But also, I was really captivated by, oh, great, because next year they're going to surely tell us what really is true. And then, to my shock, in the subsequent years, they didn't. We covered other things in religion class, family life, comparative religion, whatever. But nobody came back and said, okay, so here's what is true. So I figured I can't go through my life having no idea what's true. So that's why I chose the Catholic University of America. I figured I'll study religion at a higher level. And I got there, and they were still on this kick where first thing, one of the courses we were told, you're going to have all these big questions, who is God and, all that. And you're going to have to fill a blue book a week with, remember there's all blue books in college. You have to fill a blue book a week with one of these really big answers. And the priest said, if you give us catechism answers, you will fail this course. We want original thought. We want something you have actually worked through on your own. So very well, I took that very seriously because that's kind of why I chose Catholic U to begin with. And I went there and I just started, what can I really put on paper that I actually believe? And then this period of questioning went through, and I wound up doing my junior year of college in France. And somehow one day in France, this story's in the book, somehow I just wound up saying, okay, I can dump all of that belief. I just don't believe it. I don't believe any of it. So it wasn't so much cognitive dissonance for me like it was for those 4 people in the book. It was more just a process where I was almost invited to question myself out of my belief system. And I'm actually very grateful that that truth process was introduced to me, because I'm not sure if I had just been taught, if I left it at the grammar school level, I'm not sure I would have ever thought it through in any more detail than that. So I really thank them for that.
Okay, so when you talked, when you had a change of mind or wanting to explore the spirituality, did you talk to your parents or anybody else? What is the reaction from your friends and relatives?
Well, of course, my parents were dismayed. I mean, you figure, what was that, 18 years of Catholic school tuition down the drain. Why did we do this? So they were perplexed, but I think they trusted that I was, still a productive and moral person, so they didn't really, they weren't as upset as you might think. Friends, it was just, I didn't have a real religious group of friends, so, some friends were different religions and some didn't care. So that was not a big thing for me. It was mainly my parents, but they were not too concerned. I had an easy time of it compared to some other people.
So eventually, did they come around?
My parents?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my mother's passed away by now, but my father read my book and he was happy.
Oh, okay, that's good.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah.
That's validation of all the work you have put through. Absolutely.
Right.
Very good. Well, he may want you to write something else, but this is your life, so you have to do what you have to do. Correct.
Right.
All right. So let's see. So the whole idea of a spiritual development perspective can lead to a kinder, more gentle world. Now that means basically what you're saying is, do people who are still believing in various religions, do they go about what they are believing now, or they should just step out, close all the churches, mosques, temples, and everything else? They say, hey, goodbye to the Pope and everybody else, and what do they do now?
I'm certainly not recommending that people leave their church in a literal sense. What I'd like them to do is think bigger than that triumphalist provincial mindset where only my church is right. I believe if you approach your whatever spiritual group or church group or whatever it is, if you approach it in a metaphorical sense. So I want to celebrate my need to connect with something larger than myself, and I feel most comfortable in this church or this mosque or this temple or whatever it is. That's all very good, as long as you're not triumphalist about it and doing it at that literal level. And you have to get beyond the literal level to see the bigger picture, that all these different religions and spiritual quests and all that, they're always, I feel, an attempt to connect with something larger than oneself. And you can do that in any way that you find comfortable. And that would allow you to say that the guy in the different church is right too, and the guy who does no church is also right too, as long as you understand. It's not about literal existential truth. It's not like this is how you got here and this is where you're going next. It's more you want to connect with something spiritual, and therefore that's why he chose a particular tradition, religious tradition or spiritual tradition.
So if you are going to talk to your, well, I don't know, you are going to be able to talk to your church pastor or father or whoever else. I would imagine the Unitarian Church would be the most open one for this type of an approach. Spiritual approach where you don't have to. You are allowed to question whatever faith you have. I would imagine coming down to the Catholics, Mormons, and Jews, and especially Muslims. I don't think you can go and talk to your priest there and tell him, hey, listen, we should just open up all this and be broad-minded. And we cannot, I don't know whether they will agree to any of it.
Well, what's interesting is, from what I've studied, almost every, I haven't studied every religion, but almost every religion has this literal level and sort of a non-literal level.
Mm-hmm.
But the non-literal people are quiet. So it may be that the top theologians have gone through all this and they're at this post-critical level, but there's this sense that we can't tell the average person the truth because they won't know what to do with it, or because they'll become chaotic and lawless or whatever. So actually there are many churches besides the Unitarians who actually have this more open viewpoint. But what bothers me is there's not a specific terminology that says this is that kind of church and this is the other kind of church. And so people wind up in church and they're confused, and the same thing, they do studies on, like they do studies about religious people, this and that. Well, if you study just religious people, you don't know if you're studying the pre-critical religious people or the post-critical religious people, and your sociological results are bound to be dramatically different unless you make that distinction.
Excellent. Very good point. Now, before the early part of this session, you said that there is no hell or heaven. So what I got for you before we go on to the break is the music from John Lennon, Imagine. So let's play that music. We'll do some housekeeping work, and then I'll be right back. Margaret, please stay on the line. Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to Dallas Live.
Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us, above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Dallas Live. I am your host, Dr. RC. You are listening to Margaret Placentra Johnston, and you also listen to the John Lennon song. I know after listening to that song, Margaret, don't you think that he exactly echoes all your opinions?
I would think we'd have to say I had his opinions,
Oh,
although I didn't get them from him, but that does actually sum up the message of my book pretty well.
okay, so I think we got the right song there. So looks
You did.
like John Lennon had more imaginal selves common to folks like yourself. I
Yeah.
don't know whether I am joining that yet because I'm not that smart yet, but there are more folks who are in that path. I can see it. You see, I was born as a Hindu,
Hmm.
and my grandfather was very religious, but my parents were absolutely not religious at all,
Hmm.
and I don't think they even believed in God. From what I know, I never had the courage to go and ask them, "Hey, do you believe in God?" So this part of our segment, I wanted to ask you, Margaret, is there a God?
Well, we don't have time for me to answer a big
Well, you have
question like
15 minutes.
10 minutes, okay? So, different people envision when they use the word God, they envision very different things. I'm quite certain, and I no hesitation saying I'm quite certain, there is not a bearded guy in the sky who's going to pass judgment on whether we ate meat on Friday or whether we went to mass or followed every little rule here and there. There's nothing like that. That's just, again, that's that anthropomorphic language. We use that word so that common people can have something to hold on to. But there are other people who use the word God to explain connection among people. There's people who use the word God to just refer to the universe in general. I mean, uh, now that I've studied all this, I try whenever I hear someone use the word God to imagine that they're not speaking literally, and I try to imagine what is it they're picturing. So, as you know, in my book, there's a whole chapter entitled "Is There a God?" And I kind of probe this.
Yeah,
Do
chapter
we?
number 19. I got it here.
You got it there, okay? So, I kind of want to probe. Do we have to see him as this literal guy in the sky, or can we expand the concept to include other people's projections of what God might be? It could be nature, it could be the connections among us, it could be the spirit world, it could be the universe, it could be whatever connecting forces got us here in our lives today. But I'm sure it's not the judgmental, wrathful, needy God that needful of worship and needful of people praising. I'm sure there's not someone like that. I would be disappointed to find at the end of my life that God was up there.
So you are not talking about the God that generally is spoken by many, many different religions. It's usually a man with a long beard and sitting
Right.
there with the white clothing, right? Okay, now that I understood.
Mm-hmm.
So that means, do you therefore uh, believe that there is a moral authority that
Mm-hmm.
is not coming from God or religion or books of the Bible or Quran or Bhagavad Gita, but it is
Mm-hmm.
coming from our own mind, and we have to, in order for us to survive, we have to make sure that we are doing the right thing on this earth during our lifetime.
Yes, I'm quite certain that moral authority comes from within. It must come from within in order to be adequate for our complex world. So if you're just looking at the outer authority, let's take the example of the Ten Commandments, some outer authority that comes from your religion. Well, it's really not enough to make decisions in our complex world. There, very few things are as black and white as they were then. So, the do not steal. I mentioned in my book, I believe that the typical dilemma. Lawrence Kohlberg had written a book, a bunch of dilemmas, moral dilemmas, and the do not steal one comes in there. The commandment "do not steal." In one of his dilemmas, he said, there's a man whose wife is dying, and there's a pharmacist in town that has the drug that would save her, but the pharmacist will not. The man can afford the drug, and the pharmacist won't cut the price or anything. So the question is, should the man steal the drug? Well, there's no good answer, and that's where the moral authority has to come from within. The person has to make their own decision. You can't rely on the Ten Commandments for a situation like that.
So in a situation like that, probably he has to write a I owe you note and take the drug. I owe you and sign it off. And this is a promissory note after and take the drug and then come back and pay whenever he can. I guess that would be my approach. So
That's a good idea, but I think the part of the dilemma was that there is no right, wrong, should he
Right.
steal or not. So that's where the moral authority has to come in, because there are an awful lot of situations in today's world where it's not as black and white. Is stem cell research right, or is it wrong? Is abortion right, or is it wrong? Well, we don't have black and white answers anymore. The world is more complex. So I do believe that the authority has to come from within for outward moral decisions. But what also you find, I think, at this post-critical, or if you want to call it mystic level, is that people start to obey a spirit authority. It's from within, but it's not from within their mind. It comes from somewhere else, like within their heart or their spirit. Sometimes they just hear things, like they just get senses that they should do this or that, and they're asked to, one of the examples in the book was a woman who, she was attending some type of a seminar at her church or some type of a conference, and she heard the words. She didn't speak them, but they came to her. If something like, if religious services can make people feel the way I felt this week, I want to do this for the rest of my life. And that was her clue that she was to become a Unitarian minister. So that wasn't coming from her rational mind, because she had to leave behind a very good job, and she had to move, and she had to go back to school at a late age. So, that was like obeying a spirit authority. It came from her, but not her rational mind.
So then would you say, well, I mean, there is something good about all these religions, right? I mean, they're not all completely, I mean, otherwise there will be complete lawlessness, and somebody has to tell people, what is right and wrong, if they cannot come up with what is right and wrong on their own, right?
For people at that level who don't have the conscience authority well developed, yes, they definitely need the rules of a religion.
Okay, and sometimes this religion, unfortunately, you know, so that means we have two different groups of people: the religious people and the non-religious elites.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is that how it's going to go? And eventually, hopefully, everybody will become post-critical faith or post-critical stage, where they are not going to be listening to religious people, because most of it doesn't jive well at all with the real life, and you are forced to believe in things that are really not correct. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I wouldn't put it the way you put it. I believe we all have to go through these stages to get beyond. So there is a point at which being that faithful level is a desirable thing. It's sometime in late teenage or early teenagehood or early adolescence. But I believe that one should grow beyond that, if possible, late adolescence, early adulthood. That's a healthy way to do it, but a lot of people don't. And that's one thing I would like to see our society support people to grow forward beyond that literal level. And right now it doesn't. It does everything it can to hold people back, keep people at that literal level.
Okay, so before we got this 1 hour passed very quick. Maybe you should come back and talk to us in the near future, maybe after the holidays. It's almost
Okay.
4 o'clock now. Before we go, can you tell our audience one more time three things? Number one, where they can find the book, and also I noticed you also have a couple of blog sites, pathos.com and Huffington Post, and also your book website. Can you go ahead and tell all three items to our audience?
Sure. The book website is faithbeyondbelief-book.com. The book itself, again, the title is Faith Beyond Belief, Stories of Good People Who Left Their Church Behind. It's available at, Amazon and BarnesandNoble.com, all the online outlets, and a number of the physical stores are carrying it. If they don't have it on the shelf, they'll be glad to order it for you, I'm sure. And so it's also available in all the ebook formats, also available on the publisher's website, which is questbooks.net. And then again, the blogs, there's one on the pathos.com, which is a religion blog, and that's It's called Faith Beyond Belief. Yeah. And then there's also on Huffington Post, I occasionally post something, and that's just I think you get there under my name, Margaret Placentra Johnston. So, yeah.
Excellent, very good. So, Margaret, thank you so much for joining us, and we will have you back again in the very near future. And please stay on the line. Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to Dallas Live, and the number to call is 469 307 1642, and we will be right back.